Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show today. My name is Rachel Jones, and I'm a sales coach and fractional sales manager. I am very excited today to have Kemp Lyons from Ember Scout with me. And if you have comments or questions throughout the conversation, please feel free to drop them below, and Kemp and I will try to get to them in the comment section later. So, Kemp, thank you for joining us today. You want to give a little bit about who you are and what your background is?
Yeah, I'm Kemp Lyons. I am a video producer at a little production company called Ember Scout. We make movies for clients.
Okay. And what kind of sparked your passion for the storytelling, and how has that influenced your journey in the film industry?
I started this whole thing because I wanted to make video games, which is a really funny place to start.
Okay.
But I grew up in like the late 90s, early 2000s. It's sort of like the peak narrative video game thing. And so like that's what got me interested in storytelling sort of writ large. Long story short, that's not what I ended up doing. I went into a film program because that's what I could do. That's kind of the closest I could get at the university I was at, and started falling in love with more structured storytelling, with screenwriting, and with film as a medium. And eventually you just sort of realized that like the opportunities around you are probably more important than the opportunities that aren't, if that makes sense, right?
It does make sense.
I spent years trying to like break into the games industry before I realized that I already had a job in the film industry, all completely by accident. And so when you start trying to leverage that, and I started doing it on purpose, that's how more or less my career got started. And what keeps me here is really telling and finding and telling stories that are true and good and useful. And so that's been my career ever since.
And what made you start Ember Scout? What made you launch that?
Desperation. Just kidding. So my last job was with an agency here in Cincinnati, and I had a great experience there, more or less. But they just weren't bringing in as much live action work as they'd wanted to. And so I transitioned to being a creative director for animation. And in my head, I was just like, story is story is story. Great, let's do it. Like, it's a new medium. It sounds fun. Like, I wanted to make video games, for crying out loud. How different can this be? But I guess I was a different person because after about a year of that, I was like, I need to touch a camera. I need to make meaningful choices about lenses and whatever. So it just kind of got at my craw, right? After making an independent feature film and a couple other things that were kind of around that same time, I was just like, this has been great. Really grateful for my experiences doing some of that animation work and copywriting and things, but like I need to get back on set. And so started looking for opportunities to start doing the freelance thing. And once you start doing the freelance thing, you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from asking for too much money for people just to say, let's just give it to this guy Kemp I know. He seems like a guy that does stuff. So you start saying, okay, let's start a studio. Let's do this on purpose. And so Ember Scout was born out of a little bit out of necessity. Just to, capture the budgets and capture the kinds of work that I wanted to do that I wasn't able to do just as like a solo freelancer.
It's funny how the journey we imagine when we're kids shifts so often along the way. But
think about that constantly.
Yeah, especially as entrepreneurs, I feel like you're like, I think for sure this is the way we're going to go. And then something happens, you're like, wrong choice. We will now pivot and go this way.
That's right. You're responding to this thing, not that. But great. Let's go that way. I do that. Fine. We do that. Yeah. No, 100%. That's absolutely the case. That's something that I'm really, like I said, I constantly think about, what am I doing here? How did I get here? I'm in a place that's so, so many, I spent a while in higher ed within film schools, right? Watching film students want to be here, right? Want to do this thing. And I kind of stumbled into it. And so I'm consciously aware of the luck, of the privilege of that. And one of the goals that I have with Ember Scout is to offer that same, like, let's see if we can get people in, right? Let's see if we can get people in this door that don't belong. Kids out of school that don't have that network, or career changers, or part-timers, or whatever else. I have a particular passion to bring those people into the fold because of that unplanned whoopsie daisy. I have a film studio.
Well, it's always fun when you can kind of make somebody else's journey a little easier than maybe yours was.
That's right.
And you can say, I've kind of gone through that. Here's my experience. So that way you do with that what you will, but I'm happy to lend a helping hand.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Now, can you walk us through the process of you create a lot of impact stories for companies, and what does that process look like in that journey?
The process really depends on who we're talking to, which is not what you want to hear, right? I would love to tell you like it is all beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. It's always the same. But the fact is, depending on client needs, the process starts at different places. A lot of times we are like a full service video agency where we meet a client or any kind of client, and we start having conversations about like, what are your business problems? What are your objectives? Like, I'm so happy that you've arrived at the conclusion that video is the answer. Love that. But like, what's the question that you're asking? So that we can have a bigger picture of what sort of like that marketing goal is. And then from there, we start doing the creative discovery process of like, the typical kind of discovery work of like, what are your competitors doing? What's your brand? Yada, yada, these kinds of things. Develop the script or what have you, develop the concept from there, and then carry it all the way through to final delivery of like polished end files. Sometimes we're even more tactical than that, right? Where we're being hired by agencies to execute and extend their vision. And so at that point, it's really just like onboarding with the creative team as they exist right now and saying, what's the vision? Let's catch it. Let's understand it. And let's make it better. And so sometimes that's, we're certainly not touching the script. We're probably not even touching the storyboards. We are interpreting and executing those things to a high degree of awesomeness. And so it might start in different places, but it all ends up moving into the normal funnel of video production. We start pre-production, location scouting, building crew, finding props, et cetera, et cetera. We do the typical, however many days of production we need to make to shoot the thing, and then post-production, which can be interminable, depending on client feedback, but following things through until final deliverables.
Okay. And if somebody comes to you and says, I really want to make this impact story, what do you focus on? What kind of the elements do you look for when you are trying to find something that'll resonate with an audience?
It's a lot of listening early on and trying to ask both obvious and sometimes cynical questions, which is a little counterintuitive. But when we're talking about impact, I think the culture that we live in is so inundated with advertising messaging that when we want to make a genuine, authentic, true story of impact that is also like a marketing asset, I think we have to approach it like our audience does, with a degree of skepticism, and not with the intention of derailing the creative process, but with the intention of finding the truth. So everything, when we start on impact stories in particular, which can encompass many things, but most often are like little like testimonial spots and things like that. It's really like talking to the people who are living the impact of that brand, that product, that idea, saying, what is the big deal? Like, why does this really matter? How is this actually changing your life? And like, then going like, but is it really? Like for real? Yeah. And so it's a lot of those kind of questions, trying to understand what really makes it tick. And then from there, building, a relatively intentional story that we can chase through interviews or through a script of some kind.
What I really love about what you just said is, in a lot of ways, it's very helpful to the sales team after that, because we are also good salespeople. Also, are supposed to listen. So having a piece that really resonates with the client and really resonates with the people they're trying to reach allows, down the road for some of their salespeople to talk through what is impactful to you as a prospect. Here's how we've impacted people in that same way, and be able to share that as a line down the road to their potential prospects, to say that this is how it's impacted somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's yes. And I try to have those conversations with no clients in the room. It's one of the things that and this doesn't work all the time. Like, I've done work for like banks and stuff like that, where you can't, for compliance reasons, have conversations that are off the record, essentially. But what I like doing is saying like, hey, no camera's recording. No, my client is not in the room, or your whatever, right? Like, the relationship between the subject of the story and our client is, who knows what that is exactly, but like, we all know what they want you to say.
Mm-hmm.
But like, for real, what's the truth? Like, what is the real, honest to God's truth? And there have been occasions where, I get an outline from a client and they're like, we think it's this. And it's like, great. Okay. Let me go find out. Let me do our discovery work. And let's have these
Mm-hmm.
pre-interviews with the subjects and let's find out. And they're like, well, yeah, that's true. And I say, tell me more. Yes. How true is it? But the story ends up being more interesting.
Yeah.
Right? That's to me, this is what I say to the subject is I'm like, listen, I have no interest in telling a lie or asking you to tell a lie or something that's even like a lie, because the truth is more persuasive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the truth is almost always a better story. Almost always. I mean, always a better story to tell. And so my goal when I discover those things is to go back to the client and say, hey, I heard you think the story is this. Well, we did have a conversation. What would you say if the story was this instead? And there might be maybe a few more obstacles. There might be a few more objections. There might be a few more like bumps along the way that brands can sometimes get skittish about. But I think the smartest marketers understand that like leaning into that uniqueness, the uniqueness of that obstacle is really the thing that's going to set it apart. Right. And so I love the idea of sharing with sales teams and stuff like that. But for me as a storyteller, and I think for the ultimate like film that we're making, it's so valuable to have that conversation completely off the record.
Oh, absolutely. This is like
I mean?
after the thought, after it's shot, I was thinking that it would be helpful for me as a salesperson to have that piece that maybe lives on the website.
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
It's commercial.
Use case wise. Yes.
A conversation. I now have a video that says, hey, we helped somebody with that exact pain point that you have. Let me send that over to you so you can see what we did.
That's right.
So I
social proof, right?
Because
it's not always going to be the same problem, but it's always going to be a real specific story of a real specific problem being solved by your brand, your product, your idea, your person, whatever it is. And what it really did to change somebody's life. And even if that doesn't match one-to-one for your prospect's like problem, the brand, the problem solvingness comes across. I think that's valuable.
So we've talked a lot about the process, but what services do you offer businesses that are looking to leverage the storytelling with their brand and create more impact?
Everything from creative discovery through delivery when it comes to video production. So we don't, right now at least, drive marketing strategy. We don't manage like channels. So we don't manage social channels or whatever else. And so really the service that we are is when you say, aha, we should have a video for that. That's when we step in and more or less, again, depending on the client's needs and where they're at, what skills they have to bring, we'll just take it from there. We'll say, great, you want a video? Great, cool. Let's do it. And then we do it from there.
Okay. Now, can you share a success story of one of the clients that you've worked with and how that's helped their company?
I can be generic a little. Well, I can be white labely because I don't want, we haven't talked to anybody ahead of time, but there was an agency I worked for. We have a good relationship with, who brought us in for a retainer client that they had who had a problem with believability. Long story short, what they were offering was not believed by their audience. Part of it was their website, and then just like their brand in general looked kind of scammy. And some of that was like outside of the videos, what like our purview. But one of the big, again, the question is, how do we increase our trustability, our likability, our credibility? That was the problem. The answer was, okay, well, video we think is part of the answer here. And so this agency asked us to step in to manage the testimonial impact story side of that. And so this company, this client, and the agency and us for 2 years or so made 2 to 3 testimonial videos all over the world. Like literally, it was very cool. Now this is in the days of COVID, right? And so we also had to innovate a ton of like technical solutions for managing production, for reaching out to people. What we'd end up hiring local filmmakers, like, and not only did we get all of this content, but we did it really affordably because we weren't flying all over the place. Now there's lots of challenges to overcome with that as far as like consistency and whatever, but this is a place where impact stories really shined. And it's actually like, it's hard to imagine a client with a clearer problem for which impact stories are primed to solve, right? We have a credibility problem, an enormous worldwide culture spanning credibility problem.
Mhm.
Can you make for us a series of testimonials on every continent?
Mhm.
The
Wow.
answer, right? It was very fun, very, very fun, except for the waking up at 2 a.m. to do interviews in India. That was less
Yeah,
fun.
that would be less fun.
But, but it worked, right? Their
Mhm.
reputation transformed over those couple of years. It went from people believing they were a scam to, uh, their service was essentially like, I mean, they went bonanza. The number of applicants went up.
Mhm.
The overall sort of like brand positioning went up. They went from no one's ever heard of them to the content series. I just saw this on LinkedIn, actually, the content series that they made that we started with them that they sort of took over. I think it's at 1 million followers on LinkedIn, 10
That's
million.
amazing.
It's like a crazy thing. They're like in
Mhm.
the top 15 newsletters on LinkedIn now because, and I'd like to think partly because of the
Yeah.
testimonial work that we did for a few years to sort of like lift their brand up
Mhm.
from sort of the doldrums that it had drifted into.
Now, I heard you say that you weren't flying all these places. Obviously, COVID was happening, but I know you are located in the Cincinnati, Ohio area.
Mm-hmm.
Do you predominantly work there, or do you also fly throughout the U.S.?
Yeah, we go everywhere. Yeah, last November we were in New York and in November and December we were in New York. Yeah, I've been all over the country. In fact, even with that one client, there were still times,
Hmm.
it didn't make sense 3 times a month to fly everywhere, but we did a week in Dubai with their executives. We did,
Cool.
anything domestic, I would just fly out and take care of myself, stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, we fly all over the place, and I think there's a reasonable question to ask, like, why fly anywhere if this remote production thing works so well? And
Yeah.
say, like, there is still added value to like being the creative in the room. I think the
Hmm.
spots that we do ourselves are stronger. It solves other problems, but when budget and scale are the thing that you're trying to do, you make other sacrifices. But yeah.
I think that's one of the things I've noticed when we've been talking is the creativity aspect of
Mm.
staying within budget. Like, I think
Mm.
we've had conversations in the past. We've talked about, okay, what are these projects and how can we help this client
Yeah,
within their budget and
that's right.
and still be efficient and still give a good quality product. I know that's really important to you.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me a platform to say this. Future clients, tell me your budget. It's okay. I'm not going to steal from you. I promise. It's one of the pet peeves I have. Like when we talk with clients, so they're so primed when they're talking in a sales sort of situation, not to share their
Hmm.
budget. But my passion in particular is like, let me optimize that budget. Like, let's
Yeah.
optimize the spend. Let's not waste time stabbing in the dark of like whatever,
Hmm.
when my goal is to give you as much as possible.
Right.
Um, for the dollars that you spend on production. And there's a lot of tips and tricks that we have developed or learned or used along the way to optimize those dollars, to make sure that for every $1,000 of production, you get, more than $1,000 worth of use for sure. So yeah, I'm a big fan of creativity within a box, to be sure.
Hmm. Well, I think so many people in a sales aspect try to hide their budget, and it's actually
Mhm.
really not doing them any services. I've told folks, like, look, if you have a specific budget, I can tell you exactly what we can format to help you
That's
there.
right.
But if I'm just shooting in the dark, I don't know if I'm going to give you the whole like kit and caboodle, and then it's going to be $50,000 over your budget. I need to have at least a rough idea of where you're trying to land so that I can be respectful of your time, your money, and we can still get you a really good quality product. Because if
Hmm.
you're going to go with the cheapest, you're probably not going to get the best quality. Not
Hmm.
always, but they have that time, quality, and money.
Hmm.
That little triangle on
Yep.
you can have two, but beware of asking for all three.
That's right. That's
Um,
right. And sometimes we can deliver that, but yeah, when I'm feeling punchy and people are like, "How much do you think it'll cost?" I'm just like, $1 million. I don't know. Does that work for? I mean, if that works, great, let's do it. But my guess is your budget is less than $1 million. So let's talk about that and how we can optimize video. I've been doing this a long time, and I'd rather, it's 2024. You can't just make one video, and so
right.
finding ways to optimize spend to at least create multiple deliverables out of one production,
Mhm.
project, like is a minimum like thing these days.
Right.
So yeah.
Now, as we wrap up, I normally ask for one like insider tip. So somebody
Hmm.
is wanting to create one of these powerful impact stories, other than working with you, which is going to be the number one recommendation, what would be something that maybe they come to the table with to make that connection with their audience a little bit easier through the journey you're working with them?
When I thought about that question, I think the answer is really, I've kind of already touched on it by accident, maybe, is the truth. I think it's really easy when you're trying to tell impact stories, you're trying to gather testimonials or endorsements or whatever, to look for all of the easy things in the relationship. And I think it's a better story if we look for the truth of the story, which is like, what were the hard parts? How do we get through them together? What challenges did you think were insurmountable? Now, ideally, the answer to that is then we get it. We did it. We get it. We got over it together, whatever. Like that's almost always the answer, right? Is that we did get through it together. And so really embracing obstacles and looking for the truth instead of just sitting on the surface level. Let's just check this box. Like that would be my number one tip.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kemp, for being here with me today. I really have appreciated having a conversation with you. And I would give everybody a shout out to throw any questions below that you have and reach out to Kemp if you have any video products coming up. Thanks, Kemp. Have a great day.
Thanks, Rachel.